Hello and welcome back to Art Masters with me, Mrs. Portilla. Today we are going to be doing work by illustrator John James Audubon. He loved doing realistic paintings of birds. He studied so many and he sketched so many birds. So he often did, before he did like a final painting like this, he did small detailed drawings or sketches of the birds. So today we're going to be making a bird drawing just like Audubon would. We'll be starting with some simple sketches using basic shapes to get the realistic view of the bird, and then we'll be using chalk, pastel, and colored pencils to do our final details. So let's go ahead and get started with our illustration of our bird just like Audubon. So to get started with our Audubon bird illustration, we are going to do a small sketch. So Audubon did many small sketches before he would start his drawings. So when we're doing a sketch, we're thinking about the basic shapes. Circle head, big oval body, triangle beak. So you're really trying to break down what you're drawing into basic shapes, and then you get into more of the details. I'm going to be doing this thick knee bird, and I would say this is kind of like an ellipse, like an elliptical oval shape here. And then this is also kind of like a big, you can almost make this a big half circle or a large oval. And then looking at my placement on my paper. So the bird's head is a little off-centered. It's not quite in the middle, but it's pretty close. And you'll notice that it's higher up on the page to leave space for its body. So let me show you how I'm going to sketch this bird. You can choose any of the birds. This is the one that I'm going to do the example. No matter what, you're always going to be breaking down into shapes. So first I'm going to do my head, which I find is kind of an oval. And like I said, I don't want to do it down here. There'd be no room for the body. So I'm going to lightly hold my pencil because I'm sketching. And you'll see I don't just try to get one circle in one shot. I'm going to kind of go over my shape a couple of times till I get the shape that I want, because we'll go over it after. Okay. So I have my kind of oval for a head, and I have it in the correct spot of my paper. And if you mess up, we're actually going to cut this out. So just go back and redo what you want, because we're going to go over it. So then for the body is bigger than the head, and it kind of goes off to the side of the paper. So I'm going to draw this large kind of circular shape and then have it go off the body. I might want to make my head a little bit bigger. And then I have my beak, which is kind of a triangle shape. If you were doing something like this guy, it's kind of the same thing, right? Circle for a head, but look at the placement on the paper. He's on this side of your paper. And then he's got that half circle body that goes off the edge and a long triangle. So you're just doing the very simple shapes to start our bird. So now we're going to do the contour line, or the shape that outlines our drawing. So now we're going to be looking at our basic shapes, but we're going to be looking more at the outline of the bird that we're doing. So I'm going to notice these shapes here where the beak connects. This is a long curved shape. This is a much shorter shape. Where his head connects to his neck here, it's almost like an L with a curve. This is more like a long S shape. So that's what we're looking at. We're just looking at the outline of our bird. We're not looking at the details yet, but just getting these curved shapes more into it. So I'm going to go over my beak, and I'm going to watch where it connects to his head. Perfect. So you could see how I went over my shape with my pencil, and I kind of stuck to the basic shapes that I have, but then when I looked closer, I kind of edited some of these curves, and now I can see my line. So you want to make sure you have a dark line, the shape you're happy with, because we're actually going to cut this out as kind of like a stencil and a mask. So if you need to make any minor edits, go ahead and do so now. All right, so now we're gonna cut the contour line. So I'm gonna use my scissors. This is where we wanna be a little bit more careful because we're gonna be using this as our mask. So I'm going to go along with my scissors along my line. All right, so go ahead and cut out along your contour line. You saw how I moved the paper so I could really get all those cuts and curves in there. So take your time and let's go ahead and cut our contour line or the outline of our bird. Great, so once you have your shapes, you're going to take your gray paper and we're actually gonna get rid of this one. We're not throwing it away, we might use it later, but we're gonna set that aside. And we're gonna use this one that has that negative space. We're gonna line it up with our paper. They should line up pretty well. Now, if you wanna move yours, like maybe I wanna move mine off to the side a bit, I could do that. So it's not perfectly lined up. That's what I'm gonna do with mine. And you should have some masking tape. I'm gonna use my tape here to tape my mask over my gray paper and onto possibly my newsprint or the surface. So go ahead and take your mask and we are going to lay that down on our gray paper. If you want to move it to change your composition, that's fine. Great, so once you have your mask on, you're gonna look at your bird piece of paper here because it tells you about the bird. And Audubon did realistic drawings and illustrations of birds in their habitat. So it's important that we try to follow along with this with the colors we have. So this small bird is colored by many shades of yellows, browns, grays, and white. So that's what I'm going to want to use for this thick knee. Let's say you found this albatross. This says the small bird is colored with many shades of blue, black, and white. So you're going to want to follow along with that one. If you're doing the white stork, mostly white with shades of gray. Its bill has shades of yellow, gold, tan, and brown. So you're going to want to read these and try to be as realistic as possible with the colors. I know we might be a little limited on the colors we get, but we're going to start with our chalk pastels, which are our soft pastels. I have white. This blue is kind of like gray. I have brown. And I have a couple of yellows. So I'm gonna kind of lay out my palette just so I don't have to think so much about it. So when I'm filling in the basic color, I'm gonna use the side of my chalk and I'm gonna pick kind of this medium tone color because I can add highlights and shading. And instead of just scribbling in a straight line, I'm gonna follow the form of my shape. When Audubon shades things, he's going around with the shape. It makes it look more realistic. So watch how I just kind of get my first layer of chalk using the side and following the shape, the roundness of my bird. So I kind of put my middle color down and I left some space. I didn't fully fill it in, which I did on purpose. So if you want to go ahead and grab kind of that middle to light color, you can add some. You're going to be kind of going around with the shape. So once you have your first kind of color laid down, I haven't blended anything yet. I'm still going with my palette of my bird. I'm going to use a darker color. So my brown is darker. And I'm going to kind of go through, I'm going to look at my picture. And I'm going to see how there's certain parts of this bird along its head, back here in its neck, that are darker. So I'm going to kind of follow what I'm seeing in my picture. With this guy, Same thing, you can see there's some areas along the edge and the curves that are darker. So I'm gonna choose my darker color. And we're not trying to get detailed, we're just trying to get the shape and the form of our bird. So watch how I use my darker color, kind of in very minimal areas, but I'm watching and following my picture. So go ahead and add just a little bit of the darks. See how I just did a couple of curves? I'm being thoughtful and mindful about where I'm putting these darks. Awesome, now we're gonna add a little bit of our lights. So just like in our last projects, lights and darks are what makes something look three-dimensional and realistic. So now I'm gonna use my white because that's part of my palette as well. And I'm going to look at my picture. I can see around his eye, there's a little bit of white, and we are going to add colored pencil for fine details. We're still just looking at the shape and the form of our bird. I'm going to add a little bit of white here where I see underneath his beak. And I can always add more later, so I'm going to be kind of minimal on this. But watch how I hit my bird with a little bit of white highlights using the side of my chalk. So you should have your pastels laid out. They're still kind of rough, but I'm going to use my tissue and I'm going to use the Q-tip. So for my tissue, we're not just going like this. We're going to do little circles, and I'm not going to push hard because I want these colors to still stay kind of vibrant, and I want to get close to the edge. So my Q-tip I could use around the edge if I want to get just really inside, right by my mask, pushing down. So go ahead and blend lightly. Great, so now we're going to use our colored pencils to do some details. The first thing I want to do are these big details, the eye and the beak. So I'm going to look at my eye. It's kind of in the middle of the head, close to the beak. And this bird has quite a large eye. So I'm going to sketch lightly with my pencil. So go ahead and sketch your eye. You can watch me fast forward and then go ahead and sketch your own eye. If you're doing something like this guy, again, you could see his eye's a circle, but it's much smaller and it's in a different spot on his head. So look at your eye, think about shapes, and then let's go ahead and draw our eye. Excellent, once you have your eye, I'm going to kind of go to my beak. I can see in my beak I have a line that goes through the middle, and then I have this dark color on the edge, and this kind of looks like a nostril. This guy, looking at the main shape, he has a line, but then he's got a little bit more detail on the beak. So look at your beak, look at the shape, think about the main details first. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to add more of the details. So this I'm going to do in fast forward because all of our birds might look different. So I'm going to point out what I'm looking at. I'm going to color in some of this black with my colored pencil. I'm going to color in his eye, but leave that white shape there for now. And then my bird has a little bit of definition on feathers, but he's got mostly these little kind of black spots. And I am going to stick to my color palette. Yellows, browns, grays, and white. I would add a little bit of the detail on his beak, sticking with my blue, black, and white. And I might add some of these hash marks for my bird. So go ahead and add any little feather details, spots, shade in the eye, and then we might go back in with our pastel after, but let's start with our color pencil detail. Feel free to watch me and fast forward. Awesome, so you guys should hopefully have some line detail with your colored pencil. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some highlights with my chalk because I feel like some of his color is getting smushed in there. So I'm going to add a With my white, I'm gonna kind of go around his neck. And I might go back in with a little bit of my dark. So go ahead and add any final shading if you want with your pastels. Once we do that, we're gonna peel off our mask. Tap, tap, tap. And I feel like mine might need a little pop on the contour line, on the outline. So I'm gonna do my final details with my pencil. I'm gonna be mindful of my hands because we don't wanna smush all of this chalk. So go ahead and remove your mask. And then you can add some final contour lines or details. You don't just want to put a thick black outline that's going to make your bird look flat. We're just going to kind of define some of the outer edges. And just watch me fast forward and you could decide if you want to kind of add a little bit of a more line using your same palette. Great, and once you're done with your bird, then I'm going to glue it onto my paper. I'm gonna tap to make sure everything's off before I glue it on. And once you glue it on, you're also going to glue your Audubon sticker on the back. You can put your name on the back, but Audubon also liked to put the species of the birds that he was doing. So if you would like, after you glue yours, you can actually write what type of bird that you did. So I did the thickney, so I'm just gonna write it right underneath. This is optional. So now I know the type of bird that I did. So I hope that you're happy with your very nice, detailed, realistic bird illustration by Audubon. So great job today, guys, doing your realistic illustration of a bird by Audubon. Hopefully you guys all came out with something that looks realistic that you like. If you have time to evaluate each other's work, you could look at the line quality of your contour line, the details, maybe the highlight and the shading. And I hope you all enjoyed your time illustrating your birds with Audubon.